Right, we're now live.
Thanks, Tim. Firstly, thank you to everybody for their patience in getting everybody online for this meeting. I know it can be quite tricky sometimes. Good morning. Welcome to the meeting of the Licensing Act Subcommittee. I'm Louise Prince, Solicitor advising the committee for today's hearing. This meeting is being live streamed and is being recorded. A video and audio of the meeting and the papers shown on screen will be publicly available on the Council's website after the hearing. This meeting is being held using remote technology, and should any committee member experience technical difficulties during the meeting, they should immediately contact the designated IT officer on the number they've already been supplied with. Please can everyone mute your microphones unless you're asked to speak, and only use the chat function to indicate that you wish to speak. Do not use it for anything else so that it is clear who is asking to speak and the debate can be heard by those listening to the audio feed. The Chair will interpret the Council's existing standing orders considering the requirements of remote participation with advice from the monitoring officer prior to making a ruling. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee, officers and those making representations to confirm their presence. Everyone that speaks during the meeting is asked to introduce themselves each time they speak, so those listening know who is speaking. I'll now do the roll call. So, Councillor Keith Roberts.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Dave Tremellon.
Present.
And Councillor Les Winwood.
Present.
Ross O'Neill, Licensing Officer.
Present.
And Tim Ward, Committee Officer.
Present.
Thank you. And now the responsible authorities. Jessica Moores, the Licensing Authority, Responsible Authority.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Rob Boland from Environmental Health.
Yes, I'm here.
And Matthew Clark from Environmental Health.
Present.
Thank you. And now each person making representations. Emma Charles.
Here.
Thank you. Sally Hobson.
Here.
And Jim Walton is on my list, but I don't believe he is present.
No, he did advise that he probably wouldn't be.
That's fine. And then the applicant, Heidi O'Neill.
Present.
Thank you. And Chris Nixon, the applicant's agent.
Present.
Thank you. Now turn to the items on the agenda. Are there any nominations for the position of chairman?
I nominate Keith Roberts.
Thank you. And can somebody second that, please? Could I have a second, please?
Yes, Sally Hobson.
So I need one of the members of the committee to act as seconder for the nomination for Keith Roberts as chair. Councillor Winwood.
Les is muted.
Councillor Winwood, are you able to, can you hear me? You're just on mute at the moment.
He's unmuted now.
Hello.
Hi, Councillor Winwood, are you seconding the nomination of Councillor Roberts as chair?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. I'll now hand over to Councillor Keith Roberts to take over the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Louise. Good morning, everybody. Councillor Keith Roberts. I'll just have to read this out to you now, this statement. The committee has read and considered the representations and evidence submitted by all parties in relation to the application. Therefore, presentation should be succinct and kept to a brief summary of key points. There is no need to read out written representations or reiterate the details of written representations at great length. The Chair will intervene if it is felt that presentations are becoming overly long, are going off track, or do not relate to the application being considered. Excuse me. The procedure for the hearing has been sent to you prior to the hearing. In general, we aim to keep to this order of business to ensure that timely and fair conduct of the hearing for all parties. If it is felt necessary during the course of the hearing, the committee may take the decision to deviate from the procedure. This is at the committee's discretion. There are opportunities throughout the hearing for each party to ask questions of others following their presentations. Please ensure that you use the opportunity to ask questions only and not to make any further points or statements. It is for the chair to decide if questions are appropriate and relate to the matter in hand. Any behaviour considered to be disruptive by the chair may lead to parties being muted or asked to leave the hearing. Does anyone have any questions regarding the hearing process?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I can move on then.
Thank you.
Question to the licensing officer. Have any representations been made or been withdrawn?
Yes, Chair, one representation of trading standard has been withdrawn, and I'll speak about that in my opening speech.
Okay, thank you. Would any party present like to withdraw their present representation?
No, thank you.
I take that's no with the silence. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Chair, could you repeat the question? I didn't.
Question for all parties. Does any party have any? Sorry. Would any party present like to withdraw their representation? That was a question.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies.
Okay, and with question to all parties. Does any party have any evidence not already submitted which they would like to put forward for consideration? Please be aware that this can only be done for the agreement of all parties present and the subcommittee, and may necessitate the hearing being adjourned so it can be properly considered by all parties and the subcommittee. Does anybody anything? No, with the silence I take it no. I now have to remind members any disclosable interest. Members are reminded to disclose any peculiar interest in any matters to be discussed which is not included in the register of interest. If following the declaration of interest any party feels a member's decision making may be prejudiced, they should make it known. The hearing may then be adjourned so the committee can be reappointed. I have no peculiar interest. Councillor Tremelian?
No pecuniary interest.
And Councillor Winwood?
No pecuniary interest.
Thank you both. Now, item 3 on the agenda is over to the licensing officer to present the case.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all. I'm Public Protection Officer Ross O'Neill, working with the licensing team and responsible for the report that you've all seen. We're here today to consider a new premises application for Heidi O'Neill at Rumbling Tummies Cafe and Bistro, which is 37 Shropshire Street in Market Drayton. As per the application, Heidi has also stated she'll be the designated premises supervisor, so she'll be authorising the sale of alcohol if granted today. The premises is located within a terrace with residential properties either side and a flat above. The premises is currently operating as a cafe. Appendix A and B are a map and photographs to assist with the location of this premises for the committee to see the layouts externally as well as the location within the market town and Market Drayton. The original application is attached to the report as Appendix C, with the plan at Appendix D showing that the applicant has applied to licence the internal ground floor only. No external areas are on the plan. There is one entrance/exit to the premises, which is at the front door onto Shropshire Street. It has been established that approximately 25 persons could be present at one time in the premises, but no fire risk assessment has been seen at present. The applicant includes an operating schedule on how they intend to promote the 4 licensing objectives as per the application and as per my report. The applicant has also been assisted by Chris, who's present today from Night Training. He's the agent for the applicant and he's been communicating with myself and all the authorities present. The applicant has applied for both on and off sales of alcohol, Monday to Sunday, 9 in the morning till midnight, to include late night refreshments, Monday to Sunday, 2300 hours, so 11 o'clock at night till midnight. And there are also some non-standard timings as per the application and again the report. Committee needs to be mindful that due to the introduction of the Live Music Act 2012 and the deregulation of the live music amendment to the Licensing Act, the applicant, if granted to sell alcohol, or supply alcohol, will also be entitled to the live amplified music and recorded music between 8 in the morning and 11 o'clock at night, Monday to Sunday, for up to 500 people. During consultation, Trading Standards put forward representation as the Challenge 25 policy, the 3 points as per the application and my report. They didn't believe that those conditions were robust enough. Communication has been held between Trading Standards Officer and Chris this week, and it's been agreed that the wording as per the representation is to go on the licence if granted, except one condition. Number 6 will read, all persons under 18 must be accompanied by an adult after 7 o'clock. So that's all persons under 18 must be accompanied by an adult after 7 o'clock to replace the condition 6 put forward by Trading Standards. That's your Appendix F. Environmental Health has also submitted representations in relation to odour and noise concerns. They are here and present in the meeting. That's Robert Bones and Matthew Clark. Appendix E is their original representations, and then Appendix N is further supporting evidence we've received during the 20 working days after consultation to hold the hearing. There was also 6 other persons put representations forward in relation to public nuisance, in relation to mainly noise, but also including odour. They are Appendix H to M. There is also a map located at Appendix G, which highlights to the committee where those representations live in the context to the premises compared to their premises, living premises. Sorry. There's a couple of the other persons are present today to amplify their concerns. There's also comments, as you'll see in the report, of planning officer. There's also West Mercia Police Sergeant and a Health and Safety Officer. They're in the reports. They've made comments, however, not present today. They've got no outstanding representation they want to discuss or amplify. That's section 7 of the report. I've, as the Public Protection Officer and officer giving the report today, have advised all persons, including the applicant, agent, other persons present and authorities on the application. Unfortunately, we have 7 representations outstanding, hence we're here today. The reason we're here today is for you to consider and determine the application. To do this, you must give appropriate weight to the steps that are necessary to promote the licensed objectives, any representations, the 182 guidance of the Licensing Act 2003 and Shropshire Council's licensing policy 2019 to 2024. You then may grant the application in full or in part, subject to such conditions deemed necessary and appropriate to the 4 licensing objectives, or refuse if deemed appropriate for the 4 licensing objectives. Once the decision is made, your decision must be justified and you must have supporting evidence which all persons present today will receive, including anyone that's not in the meeting that's put representations forward. The decision must be made within the 5 working days, and anyone here, once they receive that decision, have 21 days to appeal the decision. That's the end of my opening speech, Chair.
Thank you for your presentation. The people that are present will have an opportunity now to ask relevant questions of the licensing officer regarding the presentation he's just made. Please indicate on the chat function if you wish to speak. Please remember that when you ask to speak, you should unmute microphones, state your name and remute on completion. And first of all, responsible authorities. Would anybody from Environmental Health wish to ask a question?
And nothing from me.
And your colleague, nothing?
No, thank you, not to this stage.
Okay, thank you. Any other responsible authority?
No, thank you, Chair.
No, okay. Any other persons that want to ask a question? I haven't got anything on the mute yet. Yeah, I've got Chris.
Thank you, Chair.
Right.
Just a quick one, really. We do have a couple of amendments to propose to the application as it stands. I can either leave this to my submission or I can go through it now. Which would you prefer?
Leave it for your submission then, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else like to ask a question? And the applicant has opportunity now, or the applicant's agent. Any questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And my colleagues, committee, any questions of the licensing officer?
Not from me. Thank you, Chair.
No, not for me, thank you.
Okay, right, not for me. So we move on to item number 4. The applicant presents a case. Can the applicant introduce themselves and present their application, please?
Good morning, Chair. Chris Nixon, applicant's representative. I'll be presenting our opening submission. With me, I do have the applicant and proposed DPS, Heidi O'Neill. If you could say hello, please, Heidi.
Hello.
So yeah, I'll dive straight into it if that's okay. Just a quick introduction to clarify for the panel, if you don't know the premises directly. It is a small cafe bistro with a maximum capacity of 25 customers, as presented very helpfully in the officer's report. The premises serves a range of both hot and cold cafe meals and has applied for the licence to enable it to sell alcoholic drinks alongside its existing offering, once the national restrictions allow, of course, but we've made the application. The business has been in operation for well over 2 years, and we have never received any complaints. It's clear from the objections that the main points of concern surround perceived public nuisance, in particular noise, odour, and the use of the rear yard, or what's been described as a beer garden, but it is a yard. Increased attendance and waste, and we would like to focus our submissions on addressing these points. We can confirm that we will not be utilising the rear yard as a space for customers. It's something that has never been the intention of the premises. We don't have sole ownership of the area. However, if it would provide comfort to the residents and assurances to the authorities, we are happy to propose a condition. I'll leave that to your decision, councillors, but to clarify or amplify, I should say, what was in the officer's report, we've not applied for the rear yard. It wasn't included in the plan or licensable area, and we have no intention of doing so. With regards to the noted concerns regarding waste disposal, we can confirm that we have in place a commercial contract for waste disposal now. And that has been communicated to Diane Roberts, one of your public protection officers. We would like to assure the panel that we are aware of the concern from local residents regarding the thoughts of increased traffic. However, this particular issue is not something within the scope of the licensing regime, and it will fall to planning and highways to address such a concern, should it become an issue. However, given our location and the known lack of parking, we observe that the majority of our customers will arrive on foot regardless. We gladly acknowledge that West Mercia Police confirmed they've not received any calls for concern in relation to crime and disorder. We accept their additional wording via CCTV. I appreciate it was a comment, and we do acknowledge that obviously that was a comment, not an objection. Just a couple of amendments to add to the application that wasn't included in the report. Ross very helpfully there outlined for you the agreement with Trading Standards, so I won't go through that. It may not be apparent from the hearing pack, but we have been in discussion with Mr. Boland, and that was confirmed by Ross, your EHO. We are pleased that we can confirm in part we have reached agreement on certain aspects of his concerns regarding noise. Namely, agreement to 2 additional conditions. 1, no alcohol to be taken off the site in open containers. 2, alcohol is only to be served to patrons having a seated table meal. Further to this last condition, we have proposed that our client be allowed to serve alcohol to persons waiting to be seated, and also allow the premises to have a small provision to serve alcohol to persons not having a meal. Mr. Boland has agreed to this, by the way, and this is in 2 additional amendments here. Number 1, notwithstanding condition 2, and that's the condition regarding seated table meals. Customers may be supplied with alcohol drinks prior to their meal commencing and after their meal ending. And lastly, notwithstanding condition 2, the premises licence holder may supply alcohol without a meal to a maximum of 6 customers at any one time. Councillors, we are happy for these conditions to be added to the licence. In terms of hours, we have also made a slight amendment. Mr. Boland's concern relating to noise is that the hours of trading. I can confirm that following further communication, our client is happy to reduce the hours applied from midnight 7 days per week and opening activities to 2200 or 10 p.m. Sunday to Thursday and 2300 or 11 p.m. Friday and Saturday. Licensable activities, namely the sale of alcohol, will cease 30 minutes before this. Again, councillors, we're happy for this to be amended on the licence. Following this, we would submit that our proposed decrease does represent a substantial reduction in trading from our original application, especially in the light of the premises that has operated without any recorded complaint and the undoubted pressure on viability of hospitality businesses brought about by the current national restrictions, which I'm sure goes without saying. I'd also like to touch on odour briefly. In relation to concerns raised by Mr. Boland, your EHO, and also the interested parties regarding odour, we have proposed and agreed with Mr. Boland that late night refreshment be removed from the application. That we have confirmed that as withdrawn. It should, however, be noted that we were subject to a visit February 2nd from Diane Roberts, one of your public protection officers, as I've mentioned, and the extraction from our kitchens was discussed. The officer confirmed to us that for the level of activity, it is her belief that the extraction unit meets the requirements that the law requires in relation to ventilation, being both suitable and sufficient to reduce high humidity, room temperatures, cooking odours and airborne particles. However, we have also agreed that equipment may benefit from a deep clean, and we agreed to undertake this alongside exploration of options to improve the overall air quality and extraction. Councillors, I have submitted further supporting evidence, which I believe was SE1. Ross might want to correct me there, which is in the reports pack. And I think I'll leave it there, councillors, for our opening submission. I'm happy to take any questions, and I say Heidi is here as well if you'd like to ask her. Thank you.
Thank you for that. You will now have an opportunity to ask any relevant questions of the applicant and applicant's agent. Please indicate on the chat function if you wish to speak. Please remember that when you're asked to speak, you should unmute microphones, state your name and remute on completion. I've got Emma Child.
Thank you. Yep, it's
Chair,
Emma.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Chair, it's Louise Prince, solicitor. We need to take the questions in order that they're listed on your sheet. So it starts with the licensing officer.
Sorry, I'm getting excited, Louise. Yeah. First of all, that's the licensing officer. Any questions?
Thanks, Chair. Just a few things. Question that Chris has mentioned. The police comments. They did make a comment, and there's wording in there. Are we saying, Chris, that you're not going to take that into consideration and not going to consider that wording for the application?
No, Ross, we are going to consider that recommendation on the application. Yes.
So are we saying that you're happy for that colour wording to be included?
Yes.
Thank you. Also, there's just a question in relation to alcohol and seated for patrons. You mentioned a waiting time, a small area, maximum of 6 persons. What are we proposing for this time? Have we got a condition in relation to that, or how's it going to be placed?
It's not actually a time. Ross, would you like me to cover them again, just so you got them down clearly?
No, I've got the understanding of it, Chris, but I just want to know how we're thinking. If there's no time on it, how does your applicant police the time?
I'm sorry, Ross. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking me here. Could you repeat that?
You stated in relation to alcohol and people seated that customers could drink prior and after the food. Have you determined a time for these, or is that if there's no time on a condition, how would your how would Heidi police that?
I mean, I suppose common sense would have to prevail here. I mean, prior to meal, you could think immediately prior, and after the meal ending immediately after. I mean, I'm not sure it would be suitable to put a time on that. What are you suggesting here? We put a number of minutes on it? I don't think that would be appropriate. It's pretty clear that we should probably just take a common sense approach to this, shouldn't we?
I'm not proposing anything, Chris. I'm just asking the question just for clarification for everyone present. So that's fine.
Personally, I would think yes. It's apparent from the wording. It's immediately prior, immediately after. I don't think it has to go further than that. It's enforceable as it is.
Just one more, just for clarity, just a question in relation to, I can't see the current operating hours of the premises and the report that Di Roberts has put forward. Has that report been done on the current operating schedule, or has that been report done as if this licence was granted?
Are you talking about the amendment to the hours I just stated there?
What's the current operational schedule, and did Di Roberts do that report on the current operating schedule, or was it a report on if this licence was granted?
I believe it's the latter, if the licence was granted.
Could I maybe make a thought on that? It's just Heidi, because obviously I was present with Diane. Is that okay? Yeah, Diane did what is currently present. And just to clarify, I know in your opening, Ross, you mentioned we were just a cafe. We are actually open in the evening as well. We are a bistro as well already. So it is under the current conditions. Although currently we can't have people sitting in due to COVID, obviously, we're doing takeouts. So I have reduced in the last couple of months, obviously since we've had to have shutdown, that we are just doing takeouts, but we're still open Tuesday and Saturday evening. So not as often as we would normally during normal times, but just for now. But she believed that, obviously I told her about the hours, and she believed that what we had was sufficient.
So I've been corrected there regarding the Diane's report. Is that does that answer your question? Yes.
Yeah, just one more, Heidi. What times do you close on a Tuesday and Saturday?
Okay. So what was that, darling?
What times do you close at the minute on a Tuesday and Saturday?
Currently, we stop serving food at the moment at 8:30, and that's with always roughly. We have a couple of regulars that come in, a couple of paramedics that work late. So we do sometimes. We certainly run till 9 because of cleaning up and what have you. But normally we stop food at 8:30-ish, and then we run over to sort of 9-ish.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Chris. That answers all my questions, Chair.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Responsible authorities, Mr. Boland, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, good morning, Chairman and everybody. Just a bit of clarification, really. Chris and I had a number of conversations to try and reach an agreement and a compromise. I think we made some progress, but didn't get all the way there. The conditions he mentioned around food, not serving alcohol, sorry, only serving alcohol with a meal, is to try and future-proof the licence so it remains a restaurant in effect, rather than changing over time to become a drinking establishment. Hence the need for conditions that basically require alcohol only to be served with a meal. So I'm pleased those conditions have been accepted.
Okay. Thank you. Jessica Moores, is that?
Sorry, could I just jump in there on as a responsible authority in environmental health as well, just to follow up, please? No, it's confusing with two of us and when we're not in the same room, so no apologies required. Just a couple of questions, please, Chris. You've noted that there's a request to go over and above just serving alcohol with food to allow up to 6 people at any one time to be in the establishment just for drinking purposes, which is, looking at the numbers involved, that's about a quarter of the footfall in the premises at any one time, which seems rather notable. I just wondered if you could provide some detail as to why that requirement is there. because to me that leads us into straying into the realms of there is potential mixed use here in planning terms, but we should consider that in terms of the potential impact. It makes it not just a sit down meal with a drink, it makes it a drinking establishment mix, which has its own concerns, particularly in noise. I think those have been previously highlighted in Rob Boland's report.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to explain the 6 persons. I mean, just a point of clarity there. I think you're running off slightly further down the road with that point, Matt. You know, to suddenly say that it's a drinking establishment because less than a quarter of the premises can do so without a meal is a bit of a stretch. But to answer your question, in terms of why we've asked for that addition, that would reflect the cafe nature of the premises. Just like anybody coming in to have a hot drink by itself, you could reasonably expect a person to come in just to have a drink. We don't think that's too much to ask, and certainly not a risk to the licensing objectives, considering the other conditions proposed and the reduction in hours. I suppose that the only way to describe it is if someone was to come in to have a look at the menu, decide not to have a meal, then leave, that provision would allow for that, or better still, guard against an accidental breach because somebody didn't actually stay for a meal. But it is proportionate and reflective of the business model as a cafe. So we think that's more than reasonable. 6 persons is not substantial in any way, shape or form. And if I may, the number was in discussion with Rob, and it was his suggestion that we reduced it to 6. So yeah, we don't think that that's an issue at all, and it's not a risk of the premises becoming a drinking establishment. Though you quite rightly said there, if that was going to happen, you do have provisions under planning legislation to shut this down. So yeah, I wouldn't agree with the concern, but that's the explanation of why that's there.
Thank you, Chris. Just another couple of points. I note that the reference to the report by Diane, one of the food officers that's taken a visit to the property. Just for confirmation, the way I read that information provided is a comment on the suitability of the extraction system in relation to food safety and food hygiene. Can you just confirm that that's the case and that Diane's comment wasn't in relation to the suitability to prevent public nuisance, please?
I suppose it's a bit of both. I mean, it quite clearly states in there remedial actions to be taken to prevent odour nuisance. So I suppose it's both in that instance. Yeah, does that answer your question? I mean, it's kind of both in there, Matt.
I think that the point in relation to reducing odour was specifically stating in relation to cleaning the system because it was in quite a dirty state at the time of the inspection. And so it's to my eyes, it's quite clear that there would be a reduction in odour if the system was cleaned. But for clarity, I'm reading that and saying that overall, it isn't a statement from an officer saying that no public nuisance is likely to occur from running this system. It is there to clarify that in terms of food legislation, the system is considered adequate.
Yeah, though, I mean, kind of a strange point, Matt. Existing requirements are there to reduce odour. So again, I suppose the answer would be yes, both. She does confirm that it meets requirements and that any other system as a result would be inappropriate, and therefore it meets the regulations. So naturally it does reduce odour, hence the regulations being there. So yeah, again, does that answer your question?
Not really. What I'm trying to get at is the comment that was put forward by the food officer is quite specific. If it's read in its entirety, it's there in the appendix for everyone to read, and it is there to suggest that food regulations wise the extraction system is suitable. that isn't a reflection on would an extraction system create a public nuisance as defined under the licensing regime. It's accepted that by cleaning the system that is there, which is quite a basic system of grease baffles and grease traps, that would reduce some odour, which has already been found to be occurring by Rob Boland on his site visit. But the statement by the food officer isn't there to state that it is not likely, the system is not likely to cause a public nuisance from odour. It is relevant to food legislation and not to specifically to licensing legislation and public nuisance.
Was there a question there, Matt? But I mean, saying that it's only relatable to food legislation, yeah, okay, I'll accept that. Though that does bring an interesting point of whether odour is covered by the licence legislation, but I'm sure we'll get to that. I'm not sure if there was a question there, Matt. I'll accept that the food safety officer has submitted a report saying she's happy that the system is adequate and that she does directly state prevent odour nuisance. But if it meets regulations...
No, sorry. It really, I'm sorry to jump in, but I think it would be worth asking if possibly the statement could be read out for clarity of everyone at this stage in its entirety, because it specifically does not say that it is adequate to control and ensure no public nuisance. I think it would be very helpful, Chair, if we could just have somebody read out that part of the report, please, at this time.
I've got no objection.
Solicitor, can you assist, please?
I am just trying to find it now.
And to others that are waiting to speak, I know you're waiting to speak, but just bear with me because I've got a procedure I've got to go through.
Matt, can I just confirm it's the email that was sent on the 3rd of February 2021 from Heidi
Diane Roberts.
By Diane Roberts to Heidi.
That's it, yes.
Yep, if everybody's happy for me to read it. Hello Heidi, thank you for your time yesterday. The main purpose of my visit was to determine the adequacy of the existing ventilation system under food hygiene regulations and to see if any remedial actions could be taken to prevent odour nuisance to surrounding properties. From the food hygiene perspective, the law demands that ventilation is both suitable and sufficient to reduce high humidity, room temperatures, cooking odours and airborne particles. I do believe that your existing system meets these requirements in respect to the level of catering undertaken, as you have an extraction hood with removable grease filters and fan that exhausts to the outside. As you rightly pointed out, a thorough deep clean of the filters, ducting and external grill should improve the exhaust fumes, and revising your menu to reduce the amount of brine should help you in maintaining the cleanliness of the system. I would also recommend that over the longer term you explore options for improving the overall air quality throughout the premises by increasing natural ventilation such as windows, vents or fans. I also observe that you now have a licensed waste contract in place for trade waste. We also discussed fire safety, and I wanted to advise that you should complete a fire risk assessment. The enforcing authority for this is Shropshire Fire and Rescue, but you can access guidance, which gives details of guidance. If you have any concerns or queries, then please don't hesitate to contact me. Diane Roberts, Public Protection Officer, Health Protection Team.
Thank you. I think that's just for clarity for everyone involved in the meeting, really, because I appreciate for everyone it's very hard to be flipping through lots of documents to try and catch up with where the conversation is going. One final question or point really to make. You mentioned that there'd been agreement to an hours reduction to 2,200 hours Sunday to Thursday and 2,300 hours on a Friday and Saturday, and that this was agreed to be okay with environmental health. My reading of that and the email that was sent, which I've seen, suggested that it wasn't necessarily saying that those times were agreed to not cause a public nuisance. What it was saying is that those would be the latest possible times which could be considered, given the fact that there is no information provided to suggest that a nuisance wouldn't occur from the activities proposed, and that should other information come forwards, it may be that reduced times on those proposed would be considered relevant from environmental health purposes. Could you just confirm that is the case?
We are now discussing an email that hasn't been presented as part of the reports pack, so you appreciate we're now talking about things that everyone is not privy to seeing in front of them. But I suppose that to anticipate the question, yes, it was clear in saying it didn't fully address the concerns of environmental health because of the grounds of odour. However, it did say that it that it would remove the objection in relation to noise, and the proposed hours we have presented here as part of our submission. So yes, we were happy to do so, and those are the reasons why.
So you're suggesting that the email didn't have any caveat associated to it at all, that it said that it would remove the public nuisance aspect from noise in its entirety? That's the suggestion that's being made by your comment.
All right, could you repeat that?
Your suggestion is then that what was agreed there was put forward as agreed with the Times, had no caveats applied and had no further information. It was just to be taken as read. Those Times would remove public health, and that's what public protection had said in the email from Rob Boland. I appreciate it hasn't been presented with the information, by the way, but as you're referring to an agreement, and that is the email where it was supposedly agreed, I'm just following up on that line.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure what the point is here, Chair. The conclusion's quite clear: a reduction of hours to address concerns regarding noise. I'm not sure where you're going with this, Matt, about inferring a complete removal or caveats. The suggestion was made by Rob. He sat here, I'm sure he could confirm this, and it was regarding his objection because of noise concerns. So we have agreed, and that was in the submission, the amendment made. I'm not sure where you're going with this inference statement.
It might be worth then if we either allow Rob to pop in now, or we can leave it to Rob's representation moving forwards and allow others a chance to speak, possibly.
I'm happy with
you on that, Chair.
Mr. Boland, are you all right to put in your presentation?
Yeah, more than happy to address that point later on.
Okay, thank you.
No further questions. We'll let someone else have a chance now. Thanks for answering, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Jessica Moores, I think you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm Jessica Moores. I'm a licensing officer in the licensing team, and I'm here as the responsible authority for licensing today. Just a quick question, Chris and Heidi, about your proposed condition 3 in prevention of public nuisance about substantial food being served when alcohol is being supplied. Are you proposing to remove that condition and replace it with your proposed condition about table meals being served with alcohol?
I don't think there's any need to, Jessica. I mean, the condition reads that substantial food will be available. I suppose that happens regardless. Unless you think there's a duplication there, I don't think there's any need to remove it. Okay. That's fine. It was just a point of clarification, really. I think they might double up a little bit, but if you want to leave it, fine. And then my second part is, if you're proposing to close at either 10 or 11 p.m, depending on the day, if I was to book a table at, say, 7 o'clock and finish eating my meal at 8 o'clock, would I be able to remain in the premises and continue drinking until 10 or 11? So just to clarify there, you're stating after a meal you'd be there for about 3 hours? Yeah. Without any supplementary food, no, I think that would be in breach of the condition after a meal as proposed in the submission. So no would be the quick answer, because that would breach that condition. And then, okay, so following on from that, perhaps the question for Heidi, what do you consider to be immediately afterwards?
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry.
Hi, yeah.
An hour.
Okay, and the same question for beforehand as well. What would you consider to be immediately prior to a meal?
Okay, well, obviously in the evening, what often happens is, if I'm honest, people actually will have a 3-course meal. So obviously you may not be aware of the evening menu, but we're thinking we're looking more evening than day. It's unlikely somebody might have a drink at lunchtime, but normally what you see is people have a drink in the evening, which I think is also the worry with the noise nuisance and what have you. Yeah. But for myself, our menu will be a brief starter. They then will have a steak or a mixed grill or scampi and chips, and then further after we'll have a pudding. So people tend to come in, if I'm honest, and will stay a couple of hours. It's very much a community cafe, which the local neighbourhood will be aware of. So people come in, they sit down, they chat, they enjoy their meal. Obviously, at the moment they have coffees and food drinks and what have you. And it was just a really lovely thing to be able to offer as an extra for these people. A lot of these people, just sort of putting it into the picture a little bit, and the locals will be aware of this, is they are of an elderly nature. And a lot of them are under medication. They're not the sort of youngsters that will be coming in getting hammered, for want of a better word. That's not what they're looking to do. There won't be shops. This isn't a pub or a nightclub. It's a really small little bistro. So my view is that before, it might be half an hour before people sit down. I normally park the granny chariots up, for want of a better. They'll be sitting down. They're likely not to drink a lot. They'll be very slow through their drinks, if I'm honest. But some people, we have younger people as well. So there are younger people that come in. And yeah, I'd probably say half an hour. While they sit down, they look at the menu, decide what they're wanting. And then obviously they'll be having a starter. They might think, oh, I'll have a main course. And then normally what they tend to do is go, okay, what puddings have you got? Yes, I'd like one of those. So after the pudding, I'd probably say an hour after. I hope that answers your question to the chair and everybody.
It does, thank you. I think Chris was just a little bit reluctant to put a time on what was meant by immediately prior and immediately after, and I understand why, but based on the fact that the licensing authority will have to be able to enforce these conditions, immediately prior is a little bit open to interpretation. And from experience, I certainly have found it difficult to enforce conditions with wording like that on it. And what I would put to you and the committee is whether or not you would be prepared to have a condition on the license which is a little bit more specific in terms of what you mean by immediate. And I would have to leave that to the committee really to decide what they thought was appropriate, but that is something I would certainly like to see.
To answer that, Jessica, then I suppose our answer is if the councillors deem it appropriate in their determination to put a time of an hour prior, an hour after, we'd have no real objection. I think Heidi's just answered you there. If it would satisfy the councillors and yourselves as enforcement officers, then we'd have no objection to the councillors making that decision.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Chris. It certainly would. I'll leave it up to the committee to make their decision. Thank you, Chair. No more questions.
Okay, thank you. Other persons now, and I've got Emma Charles.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. So a couple of questions there. A cafe bistro does not need a 1 o'clock or a 12 o'clock opening hours, so that contradicts the statement that was just made. The original opening hours suggest it's not a bistro, it's a drinking establishment. That's my first comment. If they'd like to be a response from Chris or Heidi on that one.
Are you aware of the reduction in times to the application? Yes,
I am now, but that doesn't imply that it's a cafe bistro. That's a late bar.
That doesn't imply the business plan.
I'm not sure what the question is, sorry.
Your opening hours do not match up with your proposal that it's a cafe and bistro. It matches up with that of a drinking establishment or a late bar.
I'm not sure we could make that distinction. I certainly wouldn't.
I think we can.
Anyway.
Okay. But that said, the hours have now been amended, so we are discussing the hours as proposed. Yes.
I'll take Jessica's point there that the opening or the drinking with a meal and the time around that meal is key to this. All right, I'll move on from that. My second point is that when both Rob and Ross visited my garden, which is within 2 meters of the fan, it was quite apparent that the noxious substance smell was prevalent in my garden. That there has been no change in that, and when Rob and Ross visited, it was actually during a quiet time, i.e. it was COVID and it wasn't actually very busy, and I assure the committee that fan is not suitable for increased volumes and I note that the applicant typical meal includes heavy frying. It will severely hamper my ability to use my rear garden. A commercial ventilation system, I know DEFRA have withdrawn the kind of mandate as to high level kind of venting, but the commercial fan that's in use isn't suitable. I don't know whether there's any comments on that.
Well, I'm sorry to butt in there with maybe a point of order. Is there a question there, or is this maybe for your submission? Not to be rude, but I'm not hearing questions. It sounds more like your representation.
The question is anything going to be done about the noxious smell, and that therefore feeds into the public nuisance?
That should be in your presentation.
It is.
Okay, sorry, could I just say one
Come on,
thing? It's Emma, Emma Philpott, or Emma Charles, if you've got my maiden name. So you talked about the email from Diane about the ventilation system apparently being satisfactory, but then there is a comment about the suggestion of reviewing the menu with regard to the number of fried items in there. It begs the question, if the ventilation is satisfactory, why would there be a need to review the menu?
Could I possibly answer that, please?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, go for it.
Yep.
All right, Heidi.
Heidi.
Hi, good morning, Chair. Right, it was my suggestion that I put to Diane Roberts and also to Rob Boland. I met with Rob and Ross Boland on the 12th of January when they chatted in your garden on that day. At the time, they also went back and we had the conversation. They thought there was a smell, but they didn't think it was that bad. However, I mentioned to Rob at the time that I had ordered some new parts, some new filters. That was mentioned on the 12th, and they were ordered. Now, I'll be honest, they're coming from Italy. And I've only in the last 2 days had an email saying that they will be arriving. So that is new filters that will make a big difference. I also, the last thing I want to do is offend my neighbours. As far as I was concerned, Mr. Philpott and Mrs. Philpott and his 2 beautiful children, you know, I don't want to offend anybody. So also, I mentioned to Diane on the 2nd of February when we had the meeting, she thought and looked, I actually said at the time, I have not cleaned it deliberately because I want you to see it as it is. And she understood, and I advised that I'm actually having an industrial cleaner that's coming out, would you believe, tomorrow. So they're coming out tomorrow at 2:30 to industrially clean it thoroughly, and it's going to have the new filters. So if there is a bit of a smell at the moment, that should hopefully be rectified, and I hope that's agreeable with everybody. With regards to the menu, again, it was my suggestion, because obviously as a business, I'm sure you're all aware, but we all have to evolve and improve. So part of me getting the license is to evolve and improve this business, which is not to change it into a pub or a nightclub. It could never be that. It's tiny. It's 25 people in there, and it's got china and teddy bears picnic at the front. It is not a pub. But with the menu, my suggestion was, and it is evolving, was to have a jacket potato oven so that people have less chips. Because with the meals, generally people have scampi and chips. I use the grill a lot, so the majority of the food is cooked on a grill. But obviously, it originally was a cafe, which is a bacon butty. It's always been that for about 10 years. So that I can't fully get away from straight away. But I am evolving it to improve it and hopefully the food and be healthy, if I'm honest. I want people to eat healthy food. So obviously, I cook the 1-cal spray on a grill for all the bacon, the eggs. Everything is not always cooked in a fryer, so please don't be misled. And I'm happy. Well, I can't really show you that, but I'm obviously telling you that this is recorded, so I'm not going to be lying. But obviously, I'm making always the improvements with that cafe to make it better than what it's ever been for obviously many years. So I hope that answers the question to everybody.
Thank you, Heidi, for that answer. Is there any other persons who wish to speak? I haven't got them in the chat. Members of committee, do you want to speak?
No, nothing from me, Keith.
Could I just ask one question? I'm sorry, I can't get onto chat, Keith. Sorry.
Well, introduce yourself and ask the question.
Les Wormwood, Shropshire Council for Bridgnorth, Western Tasley. Just very quickly, I noticed the neighbour above down the side alley which will be allowed a smoking area. That was a little bit of a concern. It's nothing worse if you don't smoke, if you're living above this alleyway with windows open. If that's the case, could you just clarify that for me?
I don't believe we did indicate a smoking area, Councillor.
It's in the report that there'd be smoking down the side alley.
Can I just say, no,
Yeah, Heidi, can you clarify that one, please, for the council?
yeah, sorry. Yeah, I had a meeting. Again, it was a meeting I had with Rob and Ross. I don't smoke personally, and I don't know anybody that, if I'm honest, again, a lot of them are gold nodes, they don't necessarily smoke. But it was discussed that if anybody did smoke, they would go across the road and there's a bench on the other side of the road where they could have a cigarette. But as I'm aware of, nobody does smoke, and no clients of mine go into the backyards, as obviously we mentioned earlier in the opening. I hope that's okay.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I think we'll move on to item 5 now, responsible authorities to present their case. Environmental health.
Yes, yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Rob Boland. I'm one of the public protection officers in environmental protection with responsibility of looking at licensing issues. Prior to this, I was in the out of hours team for 6 years. So I've seen firsthand the issues associated with licensed premises in terms of noise, ASB, and the impact they can have on communities. I've explained my concerns about noise and odour in detail in the report, which also includes photographs of both the front of the premises and the kitchen extractor fan to the rear. I'll keep my comments fairly brief. I know my colleague Matt has some points that he might want to add later. Initially, when I first saw the application, I wasn't overly concerned. I had some reservations about the late opening hours and some concerns that the venue might evolve from being a food-based business into a drinking establishment at some point in the future. The application is detailed, and it does include conditions under the prevention of public nuisance, covering many of the issues that give rise to concern, such as noise, litter, deliveries, odour, etc. However, the conditions are generic in nature and they're not specific to the premises. On visiting the premises with Ross on the 12th of January, it became clear to me that the conditions, however well intentioned, are unlikely to be achieved and in all likelihood will be breached when the venue opens. My first objection relates to odour nuisance. And while this is somewhat unusual grounds for objection, it is mentioned in the section 182 guidance as being legitimate grounds to object. As you'll see from the photograph, the extraction from the kitchen is basically a domestic fan, which discharges at a low level, which is far from ideal for a commercial kitchen. By extending the opening hours into the evening, this will increase the odour problem. During the site visit, I witnessed a distinct unpleasant odour of grease and then bacon smells when I was stood in the garden of a neighbouring property. The granting of an alcohol licence means that it becomes viable for the business to open into the evening. It will be a different food offer to attract new customers. Currently, as I understand, the venue primarily operates in the day, so opening into the evening, even with the reduced hours, which are now being proposed, will be a significant increase in the amount of use of the kitchen and therefore a significant increase in the odour. It will be difficult and expensive to retrofit an extraction system with odour abatement technology. The neighbouring buildings are 3 or 4 stories high, so a high level discharge will be expensive. My second grounds for objection is that of noise. The premises is surrounded by residential properties on both sides and a flat above and shares a party wall with number 39. No tests have been carried out to investigate the soundproofing properties of this construction. The chimney is shared between the venue and number 39, and this is an obvious transmission route for sound. The residents at 39 report hearing both voices and music. from the premises. The venue is single glazed with no lobby system, contained sound. We know from experience that alcohol acts to increase noise levels. People talk louder, laugh and joke, and then any music then has to be turned up over the voices of other people. And the applicant has expressed an interest in holding events, but also having people drinking in the venue without having a meal. My final point is issue of noise from patrons as they enter and leave late into the evening, and they gather outside to smoke or wait for taxis. The neighbouring properties are single glazed, and there is a risk they will be subject to unreasonable noise disturbance. So, in conclusion, I would say that the business is in the wrong building and in the wrong location, become a licensed premises with opening late into the evening. Any conditions are likely to be breached, leading to future enforcement action and therefore further costs to the business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. And you will now have an opportunity to ask any relevant questions of the responsible authority, namely Mr. Boland. Please indicate on the chat function if you wish to speak. Please remember that when you ask to speak, you should unmute microphone, state your name and remute on completion. The order I'll take the questions are, first of all, the licensing officer. Any questions of Mr. Boland?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Other persons present? Got nothing on the chat? No. Right. The applicant or the applicant's agent, would you like to ask Mr. Boland any questions?
Yes, please, Chair. A couple of points for
all yours.
clarification. Sorry, can you hear me there?
Yeah, go on. I can hear you.
Okay, a couple of quick ones. Okay, right. The reduction in hours that we've proposed, Rob, does that still satisfy your concerns for noise as you communicated in your last email?
Yeah, I welcome the change in the hours. I'm glad that that is a step forward. However, it doesn't fully satisfy or reduce the risk of there being a public noise nuisance, because what we don't know is how well insulated the building is. Yes, so okay, I welcome.
That's fine. That's fine, mate. That's fine. I accept that. Could you confirm? I appreciate it's not part of the submission, but you've kind of gone a little beyond your original representation, so I wasn't really expecting this. But could you confirm whether or not you've received any formal complaints about the premises, please?
To the best of my knowledge, I've only actually been in this particular team for 6 months. I'm not aware of any complaints prior to the application.
That's fine. Thank you. I would take slight issue to suggest that alcohol would increase noise level. I can't accept that at all. But just in regard.
Hello?
We've lost you, Chris. Are you still there? Yeah, we lost the agent. Can anybody, solicitor, can you hear me? Because lots of things are frozen.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is there any way of getting a message to Chris just to let him know? Because I'm not sure whether if he's dropped out, whether he's still able to see the chat function.
Yeah, I'll drop him a quick email now.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. Bear with us, the technology, everybody.
Hello, Heidi O'Neill is back in the meeting, Chair, everybody.
I just had an email back from Chris. He's just sorting out an internet problem. He'll probably be about 5 minutes.
Solicitor, are we okay with that?
I think so, Chair. I don't think we've got an option but to wait for him.
Well, that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, could do with a toilet break anyway.
Yeah, perhaps we should take 5 minutes then to for a comfort break.
It does bear in mind that the meeting's still being live streamed and recorded.
Yeah. Well,
that's fine. If you want to take a comfort break, that's fine. It's just
just put your microphones on mute and a couple of minutes for a comfort break.
Okay. Councillor Winwood, if you can hear me before you disappear off, could you just mute your microphone, please?
Yes, okay.
Thank you. Welcome back, Chris. The members are just taking a brief comfort break.
Understood. Thank you. Sorry, just to clarify, what time are we supposed to rejoin?
I think we were just waiting for you to log back in. I think there were only going to be a couple of minutes.
I got you. Thank you.
I think everybody's back, aren't they?
Yep.
Councillor Tremellen, are you back online as well now?
Yes, back here. Yep.
Lovely, thank you.
Right. Chris, the agent, would you like to continue where we lost you somewhere?
Yeah, apologies, Chair. I just quickly rushed downstairs to beat my router somewhat, but it seems to be working now, so hopefully that'll be the end of it.
Okay. Best of luck.
Yes, thank you. Slightly lost track of where I was, but I suppose I'll end quite briefly with that question that I was posing to Rob. Rob, just to clarify, we have applied for a license to sell alcohol, and that late night refreshment has been removed, and that any odour issues are existing, not in the actual application. Can you just confirm those three is correct?
No, I don't totally agree with that. At the moment, the cafe primarily opens daytime hours. The addition of alcohol makes an evening offer viable, because clearly most people want to have a drink with their evening meal.
I appreciate what you're saying, Rob, but sorry to butt in, but that wasn't the question.
Okay.
We've applied for an alcohol license, and that odour issues are currently present, correct?
Issues are present, but obviously they will be increased with the extended opening hours.
I would dispute that, but thank you.
I think I now want just Matt, the other environmental health officer, to present his case.
Hello there. Apologies, I just missed the last few minutes. The joys of working at home with two toddlers. So I can't comment on anything that's just happened. A couple of points, and I hope I'm not duplicating.
Matt, can you just stop you a minute? Matt, can I just stop you a minute?
Yeah.
The excitement of starting again. Committee, have you any questions of Mr. Boland? I don't think so. There's nothing come up on the screen.
No, not from me.
No. No. Okay. Sorry about that, Matt. Continue now.
Chair, sorry.
Good to go.
I'm going to interrupt you as well. I'm sorry. Did we have any of the other persons? I've just seen that Emma Charles had her hand raised. I'm not sure whether that was in relation to the previous speaker or in relation to Rob Boland's submissions.
That was in relation to Rob and what Rob had said and what Chris had responded with, I think. I'll just reiterate that the noxious smells would worsen significantly with the extended hours. It was only actually operated as a cafe for 5 years before that was a computer shop, not 10 years.
Sorry, Mr. Philpotts, this is for questions at the moment. You'll get the opportunity to make submissions.
Oh, okay. Apologies.
I just wanted to clarify whether you had any other questions. Sorry, Chair.
Okay.
That's all right. Thanks, Louise. Right. Matt, promise I won't interrupt you this time. Carry on.
No, it's perfectly okay. I appreciate it's difficult, isn't it, for everybody involved on these Teams meetings. A couple of points just to try and move us forwards. Just noting in the representation put forward by this service in respect to the hours which have been suggested from a point of view of helping to satisfy noise. I note that the specific wording states to close the venue at 10 p.m. Sunday to Thursday and at 11 p.m. Friday and Saturday with no additional hours outside. There is then a following sentence which states that this will be the latest times considered suitable by this service. Should noise assessment show noise impact prior to these times, additional consideration of times will be required. And it was just to expand on that point to say that what has been put forward by Rob's representation is providing information to say that those times proposed and previously stated as agreed by Chris in his piece, what are the latest which is felt could occur to not allow a public nuisance, and that would be if we had if we had information to suggest that the fabric of the building could contain the general operations of having 25 customers and the hubbub that goes alongside with those, in addition to the cooking operations, which carries a certain amount of noise as well. And if that noise didn't carry through the fabric of the building to the adjacent properties, both next door and above, which are sensitive properties as they're all residential. So that was the first point. The second point to make, I just wanted to compound Rob Boland's point made on volumes increasing as people tend to drink. I think this is well established as a fact of the case that when venues where alcohol is sold, there is a likelihood of more noise. For argument's sake, if we look at the planning regime, which I know you may say is not strictly relevant, but it gives us a gauge here, drinking establishments are put into a separate bracket to that of restaurants. There is a reason for this. One of those reasons I will put forward is that is to do with noise that is emanating. And I will leave it there because I appreciate that things are getting rather drawn out here.
Okay, thank you for that. Licensing officer, any questions of Matt Clark?
No questions, but just to clarify, I'm not sure if it was a question proposed to Chris about the hours, what he considered if it hasn't been agreed, and obviously none of us are privy to these details, but was that a question, or have I missed something here?
I was just highlighting the information which was contained within the representation put forwards in the relevant appendices. I think it's Appendix E.
Okay, thanks, Matt. That's all, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Other persons, any questions of Matt Clark? I've got nothing on the system. Applicant and applicant's agent, any questions of Matt Clark?
Yes, please, Chair. Just a couple of points of clarification, if I could.
Yeah, carry on.
In the supplementary Annex N, and I appreciate I'm addressing this to Matt, it was under Rob's name, but I'll address it to Matt because I believe it does come from both. It does mention some case law, Gold Kebab Limited versus Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government. Now that's cited for a reason that a licensing subcommittee to consider matters that would normally be considered by a planning committee. However, I do submit that this is a misinterpretation of the case law, and that the correct interpretation is that any planning committee is not bound by a decision of a licensing committee and vice versa. And therefore, any grant of a permission by either committee is not a guarantee or indicative indicator of grant of permission of the other. This is supported by Shropshire Council licensing policy at 10.5. And we respectfully request that the panel considers the objections relating to odour in light of our amended application. So the withdrawal of late night refreshment reverts this to a non-licensable activity not relevant to this particular hearing as per section 19 hearing regulations. So I suppose to frame that as a question, I don't quite understand that the conditioning of a non-licensable activity has long been a feature of the Licensing Act, but only the application that has been made. So Matt, would you accept that the case law you've quoted is actually not suitable and that the subcommittee can only make decisions based on the application made, not planning considerations?
Yes, I would accept that.
Thank you. I'll leave it there. Like Matt said, it's getting drawn out slightly, so no further questions, sir.
Thank you for that. And committee, I haven't got anything on the system, but have you any questions?
No, Chair.
No? Okay. Right.
I'm sorry about it's Heidi O'Neill. I have a question actually. I've got a couple of questions. One was, how many evenings do you think I am open when we're not in COVID? Because it was referred as more of a cafe than open at night. Are you aware of how many nights I'm open when we're not in COVID?
So who are you asking the question? This should be directed to Matt Clark.
To Matt and to Rob, yes.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, hello, Heidi. The information I have has been based on what I've heard from the neighbours.
Right. Okay. So, well, obviously, I know it was referred that it was more of a cafe than open at night. As I mentioned earlier, we're open with COVID only 2 nights, but we're normally open 4 nights anyway. So with reference to there being more of a smell because of further use, it isn't actually relevant particularly because, as I've mentioned, we're serving food already till 8:30, 9 o'clock, 4 nights a week. That was one thing to mention, because I didn't know if you knew that or whether you just thought I was open 1 night or 2 nights or whatever the hell might be. The other thought was, I know it was mentioned that it was believed that, I think 5 years was mentioned, but there's only been a cafe for 5 years. I think Mr. Philpott mentioned that. It's actually been a cafe for a lot longer. I've had the cafe for Rumbling Tummies for 2 years. The previous owners had the cafe for 3 years, Rumbling Tummies. But prior to that, it was called Hungry Horse for a number of years, and prior to that it was also a crepe where they actually did hot food and pancakes and that sort of thing, and it was very greasy then when it first opened. But that's just in case there was any misthought for the council and the chair. It has actually been a cafe for 10 years, maybe 12. Just
okay, thank you.
That's all.
Thank you. Heidi, any other questions?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to move on now then to people that made representations. Any other person who's made a representation for the application will be given an opportunity to outline the case. Presentations will take place in the following order: Emma Charles, Sally Hobson and Jim Walton. And I'll ask Emma Charles to present the representation.
Okay, to not go over the points again of my objection, the only thing that I think everybody has actually missed is there was a complaint made to the police regarding noise on the 5th of December. The response back from the police officer was to contact environmental health, but obviously as this all snowballed into that, no further complaint has been made. If you'd like the crime reference, I can give it.
Chair, if I may, I'm not sure this has been submitted in advance as further supporting evidence.
No.
It's only been presented, Chris, because obviously everybody has said there's been no previous complaints, but that's not entirely correct.
I appreciate that, but I'm not disputing that. Quite simply, you're referencing something that neither I nor this panel are able to look at and read. Hence why I raised the point.
Okay.
Yeah, could you present your case, please?
I think the only additional stuff, and I'm not sure what I am and I'm not supposed to say here, but the noise is there's a single party wall. My property is next door. It's a listed building with a single brick wall that I cannot do anything about, and the noise at a loud voice I can hear what is being said in my lounge, and I think reasonable person would suggest that would get worse with extended hours and alcohol. I'm not going to dispute whether alcohol does or doesn't make it louder, but it clearly is and will interfere with my lounge and my private life. I'm not sure what case law to quote or what human rights to quote, but the reality is that will have a significant detrimental impact on my private life. I don't know what more I am or not allowed to say on that point. I know that I think in Rob's report, he also mentions about having a two-door front door to try and keep the sound in a little bit further. And I know that was requested of a similar licensed premises across the road called the William Chester, had to have a double front door, and also they had to have acoustic glass installed on the front windows. So again, that's I believe relevant to this committee. I think it must have come in front of this committee a year or two before. I think that's all I would add at this point. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you for that. In the following order, anybody have any questions? The licensing officer?
No questions, but just to clarify, no person's putting representations needs to bring any evidence of complaints forward, and each application is on its merit. Each application is on its merit.
Thank you for that. Responsible authorities, environmental health, any questions? No, it's quiet. No, move on. Applicant and applicant's agent, any questions?
Just one point of clarity here, I suppose. What Ross has said is quite right about evidence. By the way, that was not an attempt to try and be the meanie by squashing someone down. I'm simply relating to the fact I can't comment or I can't read. But the application should be judged on its merits, and I do stress application in that. I suppose a question to the Philpotts: are they aware of the allowances given under the EPA or the Environmental Protection Act in terms of complaints, and are they aware of the provision to review a premises licence?
I'm sorry, I'm not an expert in this field, so I don't know.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I suppose then I'll explain, Chair. I appreciate it's probably Not the most appropriate, but I will explain why I've asked that question. Under environmental protection law, you are allowed to submit complaints to a premises where they are making a noise nuisance. You can do so pretty easily. And secondly, where a premises license is or perceived to be an issue, you have full rights to drag it to another one of these committees for it to be revoked. What I'm getting at here, guys, is that essentially if this premises was a problem, you have full rights to hold it to account. So if you weren't aware of that, I hope you are now. Just a clarification point there, Chair, I'll leave it.
Okay, thank you.
I think,
does the applicant have any questions?
Heidi O'Neill, I'm sorry. What I would say is I wasn't aware of any noise issue prior to the application. And what I would say is if in the future, if there was anything I could do to help, I would. And also for the people who may not know, but the William Chester pub is a pub only. It's a pub that seats many, many people, probably 50 to 100. It is not a cafe, bistro, restaurant that only would fit 25. Just wanted to make that point, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee, any questions? Don't think so. No, right. Sally Hobson?
Chair, Mr. Philpott has indicated that he wishes to speak again, but I don't know whether this is to provide clarity on a point that's been raised in a question.
Sorry, Mr. Philpott.
Sorry. Just a further clarity is that I did try and install a 7-foot gate next to the vent with the noxious smells to prevent the ingress of those smells into my garden at my expense, and to try and to overcome that. And we did have an application with a conversation with the applicant about noise on one occasion when they were playing guitars.
2 occasions, in fact.
And they ceased that activity when we requested. So thanks for that.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Philpott. Next person to speak is Sally Hobson to present.
Hi, I don't actually think I've got anything actually to add. I've listened to everything that everybody said. I'm just my one question is, I know you produced the hours, but have you reduced the ability to still have it on bank holidays and whatever till a later date? Because that's not being mentioned at all.
Chair, am I answering that, or would Ross like to as the presenting officer?
Yeah, I think the licensing officer could answer that.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware at the minute, this hasn't been discussed, and so the application that is in full plus on the report still stays for those bank holidays. That's as far as I'm aware.
Can I clarify, please, Chair?
Yeah.
Go on then.
In which case, if it's not been clear, I'll do so to the panel and to yourself, Sally. Yes, seasonal variations, including the extended hours on bank holidays, have been removed from the application.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Yeah, that hadn't been mentioned at all beforehand, had it?
Then it's very good of you to bring it up, Sally, because apparently we've all missed it, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you okay then, Sally?
Yes, that's everything, thank you.
Okay.
Oh,
Right.
excuse me. Sorry, just one more point. Sorry. You haven't mentioned anything about the fire safety, and I believe that the door opens inwards, and I believe that on a premises like that, the door should open outwards, because that's the only fire exit for the whole building for 25 people. Can you just clarify that for me, please?
Licensing officer.
Sorry.
To me, there's still inspection.
Is that a question for me? Probably it's Heidi. The door opening inwards. I believe it does open inwards, yes. And
yeah,
I am doing assessments with the fire. I mean, the fire people come around every year and do all the necessary checks and what have you. But it is something that will be reviewed as a risk assessment.
Okay.
You okay?
Yeah, it's quite a lot of people, isn't it? 25 people to get out of one door.
Well, I think the inspection is to take place, so that's to be done.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
It'd be useful if that had been done prior to this meeting, though. And if it's been done every year, then you would be able to present that information now from the last report.
Sorry, Chair, I think we're getting slightly off track here. Thank you.
Chair, shall I speak for clarity?
Yeah, if you could, I think we're going off subject here.
Yeah, on my initial report, my opening statement, I did mention that a fire risk assessment has not been seen. A fire risk assessment must be in place before the licensable activities take place. Where we're at the minute is there is no license in place, so Heidi is aware that that would need to be in place, but the fire brigade aren't in the room to discuss. No representation has been submitted.
Thank you, Ross.
Okay.
Just to confirm, sorry, it's Heidi O'Neill. Yes, of course, that will be done prior to any licence activities moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sally, you okay? I think.
Yes, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Anybody else that wish to ask questions of Sally Hobson?
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. Committee? Got nothing on the chat, so I presume not.
No, Chair. No.
The next person on my list is Jim Walton.
Chair, Jim Walton isn't in attendance. Mr. Walton isn't in attendance for the hearing. We think he's logged on to the public viewing.
Right, so I move on then to item 7, which is closing remarks from each party. I know each party will now be permitted a brief opportunity to make a closing remarks. This should not be a repeat of the case already made or discussions during the questions, but you may have some points to clarify or additional comments as a result of the questions and discussions. If you have nothing further to say, you do not have to speak. And I invite the licensing officer first.
Thanks, Chair. Just to repeat on my opening statement, really, it's the reason you're here is to consider and determine this application. You've got to give appropriate weight to the steps of what's necessary to promote the licence objectives, to consider any representations, the 182 guidance, the Licence Act and Shropshire Council's licensing policy. You can grant the application in full or in part, subject to such conditions deemed necessary and appropriate for licence objectives, or refuse if deemed appropriate for licence objectives. What I just do want to add is the clarity in relation to conditions, and there's been mention of conditions, wording, etc. These conditions, if any conditions, if a licence was granted, we need to make sure they're appropriate, they're achievable for Heidi, plus also, like Jessica Moore stated, they've got to be also enforceable from that side of things as well. That's it for me.
Thank you for that. Responsible authorities, namely environmental health. Have you any closing remarks?
Yes, Chairman. Just to make the point again that in terms of the conditions, it's important the venue remains, if it gets a licence, remains as a restaurant stroke bistro, and the conditions ensure it can't over time become a drinking establishment with all the inherent additional noise things that would result in.
Okay, thank you for that. And your colleague Matt Clark, anything?
Hello, Chair. Yes, just to follow on, I think it's pertinent to make a couple of points here on the information. We're looking at the licensing regime and the consideration of prevention of public nuisance. That's the objective. We're here to try and ensure that anything that is put in place ensures prevention, and relying on a case put forward to suggest that other regimes may cover this in the future, I think steps slightly further away from the fact here. We should be looking for prevention in the first instance. It's in the applicant's hands then to look to move forward if they can show no impact has occurred from operations to look to extend hours, and hopefully we'd be in a position where environmental health, if no complaints have been received, could support that going forwards. However, we're in a situation where no noise assessment is available to show the impact on the nearby residences. We have a resident that lives next door that has already said at the reduced volume of customers there, they can already hear some of the conversation taking place, and the extended hours would move this operation into a more sensitive time of day, likely to have more impact. In respect of odour and noise, I wanted to make it very clear that from an environmental health perspective, we are concentrating here on the premises itself. There is no comment to suggest that the operator won't do the very, very best. And from the comments that have been made, we feel that She is certainly a responsible person to go forward and run a premises. However, the premises itself, due to the fact it has low-level extraction surrounded by high-level buildings with residential receptors, the extraction system is into an area which is limited for dispersion purposes, meaning that air will find it hard to get in and the odour may linger for longer, makes it likely, in my opinion, that a public nuisance would occur with extended operating. Final point to make is that statutory nuisance was raised earlier in the conversation. I'd just like to point out that the burden of proof required for a statutory nuisance to be in place goes over and above what would be found to be a public nuisance. So relying on the Environmental Protection Act 1990 isn't as stringent a control to protect public nuisance impact. I think that should be made very clear to the panel making a decision, that legislation doesn't provide the same assurances as the licensing regime can. And that's where I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Other persons, is there anything that you wish to bring up in closing remarks?
Chair, it's Jessica Moores. Would you mind if I ask for a point of clarity from the licence holder?
Yeah, carry on, Jessica, sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, it's Heidi. You mentioned when you were responding to a question, and I haven't interrupted till now because I wanted to bring it up at the end. You mentioned that you are open 4 days a week at the moment, COVID notwithstanding. Is that the common practice for you? So 4 days a week, and what days of the week are they?
Hello, Jessica.
Hi.
Yes, they are currently Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Tuesday when we're not in COVID.
Okay, and just to clarify then, you've applied for 7 days on this licence. Is that just to give yourself the flexibility to be open, or do you intend to change your opening days?
Absolutely. I'll be honest, it wasn't mentioned earlier, but the reason I asked for longer days was just for the flexibility in case somebody had a party and wanted to celebrate on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, or perhaps a day I wouldn't normally be open. Currently, I'm closed every Sunday, and if I'm honest, moving forward, I intend to, unless it's a special occasion for somebody. I'd like that flexibility again, but I haven't been open on Sunday now for over a year. And possibly I might run it through to Monday as well. So what I'm looking at, obviously this is a growing business, it's evolving, as I mentioned earlier. And there's questions you may ask me that I actually don't know the answers to. And this is slightly one, but where I'm looking at is possibly Tuesday to Saturday. That is what I'd like to be open and to run through. We've been open on a Tuesday now for virtually from day one, and Tuesday night as well. And I'd like to continue that to Saturday.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, you're right, Jessica.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other persons present, is there anything you would like to make remarks on? Closing remarks?
No, thank you.
No.
Applicant? No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the applicant stroke agent, any closing remarks, please?
Yes, please, Chair. A couple of points of clarification, and then I'll follow with this summing up. I just wanted to remind the councillors that it's mentioned in Shropshire Council licensing policy that the council will take the opportunity to ensure that the premises contains relevant, fit for purpose and enforceable conditions. Whilst this is true, paragraph 33.5 of the policy is in relation to full variations. The council taking the opportunity to review the existing conditions to ensure that they remain valid in light of the variation proposed. This is important to make a distinction between a variation and a determination. This is a new application, so I'll just make that point there. Let's say it was mentioned by the HO, and they have rightly pointed out paragraph 9.6 of the policy, given that licensing will ensure the premises are appropriate for their proposed use. Given the amendments to our original application, which I hope are now clear to you, our client's proposed use under the licensing regime is simply the sale of alcohol. I find it difficult to understand the maintenance of an objection on the grounds of odour, as if unlicensed, the premises would still be in a position to trade as it has been. An application must be judged on its merits and that which it changes, not what it already is. That's points of clarification. To sum up, I mean, we acknowledge the concern raised by our neighbours and environmental health. And we are glad and hope that we've been able to address at least some of these concerns, and hope the steps that have been put in place in terms of our reduction of hours, removal of activities, addition of conditions, confirmation of non-use of the rear area, and undertaking concerning the kitchen extraction system provide sufficient assurance to the panel and other parties that the premises are not going to cause an issue. To expand slightly on that, councillors, we do not wish to be a problem. We want happy neighbours, and we are happy to talk to them. As they've said, you know, it's simply a case here that we need to talk to each other. And I think it's been established in this hearing that everyone is in accordance with this. However, it is important to note that with the premises licensed, in addition to responsible authorities, our neighbours would have the right to review of the licence if the premises did cause an issue. And I hope I've made that clear to the Philpotts. They have full rights to do this. And a recourse that would otherwise not be available if the licence was not granted. I think, ironically, Matt did point out there that the Environmental Protection Act, though thorough, and they are allowed in protections under Section 80, licensing is far more stringent. Paragraph 9.3 of the Section 1.8 guidance directs us towards evidence-based determinations and proportionality, again found in 10.10. A premises licence, not unlike a driving licence, is a permissive licence, allowing a person to conduct an activity that they otherwise would not be authorised to do. It's hard to imagine that a person's driving licence would be endorsed with restrictions on the basis that they might cause an offence. And I'll draw clarity here that a breach of a condition is an offence. Therefore, we request that licence be granted in line with this council's licensing policy, the Section 182 guidance, and the agreements reached on conditions, hours and activities as we proposed during this hearing. And I'll leave it to your determination, councillors. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Just one clarification from the legal officer. Are there any points of clarification the solicitor would like to make, please?
Chair, other than to assure members of the applicant and her agent and those others attending that the members of the committee will only take into account the relevant representations that have been made when making their decision, and also that they have to bear in mind the requirements set out by Ross in the decision making.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louise. Right, just before we come to bring this to a close, I just read the statement out. We will now withdraw to deliberate and make a decision. The hearing will close and you can leave the online meeting. All interested parties will be advised of the decision in writing within 5 working days of this hearing. The decision will be sent to you in the same way you communicated with the licensing team prior to the hearing. E.g., if you emailed your representation to the application, you will receive a decision by email. Any party who feels aggrieved by the decision of the committee has the right to appeal to the Magistrates Court. This appeal must be made in writing within 21 days of the notice being received to Stafford Magistrates Court. And I now bring this live meeting to a close.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. Thank you everybody that's participated.